Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here for our last segment and finishing out Ladies Night in the studio here. With me, good friend of mine, Michelle Menapace. You are a community activist volunteer. By the way, you do a lot, so that's not really a good title for you.
I do a lot.
So I want the folks to get to know you a little bit in terms of what you do, why you do it, what gets you excited, what gets you going out there. First, tell us why you do what you do.
Well, a lot of my volunteer activities, they began when my children first started going to school. Mm-hmm. And someone walked up to me and said, PTA meeting Tuesday night, library be there. And that was the beginning. And I believe firmly that a community thrives by the engagement of its citizens, and
Sure.
That's where it began with
you got the bug.
I did.
You went to your first community volunteer activist meeting and you were hooked.
Yes, well, and I also had worked when I was doing a paid gig. Worked with a lot of volunteers myself. So I was recruiting volunteers, understanding what it was like to engage those people, listening to them, and I think it just sort of spilled over after I became a mom and started doing this kind of work.
So where do you tend to focus most of your time now?
Still engaged in school-related issues, but have expanded from there. I like doing things that, especially for citizens who are typically underrepresented. Mm-hmm. That started with our children, who rarely have voices.
They have zero voice.
Especially when they're young.
Yeah.
When they get older.
And by the way, that translates into budget requests.
It does.
And so forth. So
it does. And with more than half of our county general fund going to the schools, that seemed like the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. When I would get my tax bill every year and look at that and recognize how much was going to the schools, I realized that meant a lot to both my children, to other people's children, and wanted to be more of a voice for them in the community.
So how's that working out? What sort of activities are you kind of moving forward on?
Well, right now I am working, I was just elected chair of the Community Action Advisory Board, which is a federally mandated organization, local board that oversees the administration of community service block grants, which are federal grants for people living in poverty. And I started doing that again with the transition from children as a representative from the school side, bringing the voice of families and children into that.
That's great.
And now I was just elected chair at our meeting in February. So I've expanded a little bit more, but still looking for those underrepresented voices, and certainly a lot of our citizens living in poverty are among that population.
Yeah, and the area you live, you're down in the Lee District area?
I am.
That's pretty diverse.
Yes, it is.
I mean, there's a lot of diversity down there.
Yes, and quite a bit of poverty as well. Yeah. So there's certainly something worth doing in my community. I've been a member of Supervisor McKay's Citizen Advisory Task Force on the county budget, with a focus on schools, and we're about to come out with our 7th report this year. We're working now and have another meeting tomorrow night, and that's been very educational for me as well, because I'm learning more about the county side of the budget and the work that's going on there, trying to marry that with the schools. And the focus of our group has been, since day one, sustainability. We need a sustainable government. And how do we do that? And it's particularly challenging now since the recession.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this stuff costs money.
Absolutely.
And it needs funding. And I would argue that you need to make it a priority, right? And it needs to be a priority from, Board of Supervisors to the representatives. I mean, the money has got to be there.
It is. Our citizens, though, deserve the maximum efficiency and effectiveness out of the money that they spend. And that's more of a conservative look at things than I typically do. But I think that comes from the work I've done with Jeff's group,
Okay.
and looking at that, and also recognizing that we have to maximize every dollar that we do get,
Sure.
so that every student in our schools is being served properly with the right level of education, and that it maintains the community's expectations. And I think that's going to be really critical this year, is the community coming together to say exactly what our priorities are, both on the county side of the budget, but also on the
Sure.
school side, to say there isn't any more money. The economic reality today is our supervisors can't tax our way out of what seem to be our needs. And how do we address that? That's going to be critical in the next couple of years.
Now, are you going to be testifying before the board, or for their budget hearings?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Both on my own individual behalf, but also as the representative for the Community Action Advisory Board, and their priorities, their funding priorities, which are housing, education, employment, and some emergency services, but also childcare, making sure that people can lift themselves out of poverty and have the means and to do it on their own, and not have to rely on emergency services or funding from the community.
Yeah, and by the way, for young minds, that intervention or care or education is so important. For me, I mean, Jennifer touched on it a little bit in the previous segment, that just a small investment in a child pays off dividends over a lifetime.
Absolutely, and there are the right kinds of interventions as well.
Sure.
It is one thing to bring them into the school, but if you're not following him or her in a proper way, intervening when they need help instead of reacting, being proactive, that's critical as well.
Oh, great. So, what do you have planned this year or next year? What's the activist sort of strategy here looking like for you?
I think I will continue to focus on that sustainability piece of the work that I do. I will be admonishing the school board to look at that in terms of their leadership of the school system, and also looking at how the Community Action Advisory Board's work fits into all of this, how we can help people get out of poverty so that they aren't the drain, if you will, on our resources, making sure that they become, as they want to be, the more productive and part of our community, and giving back, making sure that they become tax-paying citizens rather than, having to rely on help and assistance.
Sure. Or, we end up incarcerating people because we didn't take the time to invest when they were younger.
Exactly, and I've been involved in those issues with student discipline and trying to get that to be more of an intervention and a restorative process for our students so that they don't become
That's
incarcerated.
proactive versus reactive.
Exactly. And I got to say, our new superintendent is moving in that direction.
Good.
We have some new discipline codes
Good.
that are definitely leaning that way, and I've
Good.
been very pleased to see her
Good.
movement on that.
Well, what you sound like the ladies before you. I mean, any plans in your future that you're thinking about, or
I think I'm always thinking about
Good.
the school board, always thinking about running for office because of the passion that I have for this community engagement. And I think it's important to listen to the community. So if I were to consider a run like that, I would certainly be someone who is listening, whether you agree with me or not. I want to hear what you have to say. As Mayor Merkel was talking about earlier, what people told her kind of surprised her, and that drove then their decision. So I would do much the same sort of, have the same sort of stance on community leadership.
Yeah, I think you would do well if you should decide to go down that route. I mean,
Well, I would hope so.
yeah,
I would hope so.
I mean, and I think you said it. The important thing is kind of listening and understanding where people are coming from, right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
there's like so many people that are in public office today that they've picked, first of all, they've picked their voters, right?
Well, you don't do that on the school board, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, there you go. Maybe we shouldn't be able to do that at all.
I agree.
I mean, and once you pick your own voter, like, I know this neighborhood, this street, and these houses, these people, there are 4 of them, and they vote this way. I just think that is a horrible way to run elections, where you have the elected official picking out their own voters.
Oh, I agree. I think I definitely think it should be an impartial board or commission that determines the district alignments.
Yeah, because then I don't have to listen to anyone. Right? I've picked the voters that are going to vote me in, and I can do the heck what I want at that point.
I agree. And one of the things that Jeff McKay has said to me in working with him is, at the local level, like the supervisors and the school board, being on a leadership role, taking on a leadership role like the school board or the board of supervisors is definitely where government is service.
Yes.
It's not politics, it is service. Yeah. And you owe it to all of your constituents, whether they voted for you or not.
Oh, absolutely.
They deserve that sort of representation.
Right, because you're not going to plow this person's street and not that person's street.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't do that.
Well, and here in Fairfax County, with relation to the schools, for example, only 30% of our population have a student in a school. So
interesting.
How do you reconcile that number when so many, and with our aging population, the needs there are going to be very different than they are today.
Sure.
So there's a lot to look at. And yet, the quality of our schools drives our property values, drives the businesses that come here, drives everything that's good about our county, and we can't overlook that.
Sure.
So it definitely they are definitely difficult decisions that have to be made in terms of funding. But I think if we can say that it's sustainable, if we can say that it's honest and responsive to our community, then that's the best we can do. And I think that will help us move forward.
As we're closing out here, one of the coolest things I heard, the stat about Fairfax County, there were 104 languages spoken in the homes in Fairfax County. I just thought that was the coolest stat I'd heard.
I think there are 50 of them in my neighborhood alone.
Really?
Yes, you talk about Lee District being diverse.
Yeah,
we are.
And I just love that. I grew up in that environment. I think Herndon's that way as well, as is Lee. Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
I do hope you consider long-term what you want to do as an activist. So,
thank you.
Folks, thanks again for joining us. We'll certainly see you back next time. Appreciate it. Thank you.